26-year-old physics student built a billion-dollar drug empire from a laptop table in a coffee shop. And the thing that finally caught him was a typo he made 2 years earlier under his own name. Somewhere in a San Francisco library, a man is about to lose his whole life because he forgot to log out in time. His name was Ross Ulbricht, Eagle Scout, idealist, libertarian dreamer. Online, he was someone else entirely. Dread Pirate Roberts, ruler of the internet's first drug empire. He believed he was building freedom. The government believed he was building a cartel. Both of them were right. This is the story of how it happened and why it can never happen again. It started in 2011 in a bedroom in Austin, Texas. Ross had a physics degree, a head full of Ludwig von Mises, and a conviction that the war on drugs was a war on freedom. So he built a website, not a normal one. Silk Road lived on Tor, the anonymity network the US Navy invented and then, somewhat awkwardly, could no longer control. Buyers paid in Bitcoin, a currency so new, most economists hadn't decided whether to laugh at it yet. Ross had accidentally built the perfect storm, an anonymous marketplace, an untraceable currency, and a law enforcement community that thought the dark web was a Halloween decoration. Within a year, Silk Road had thousands of listings. Heroin, cocaine, fake IDs, the occasional printer cartridge for the record keepers. Ross rebranded himself Dread Pirate Roberts, a title borrowed, with tragic irony, from a story about honor. He wrote philosophy essays to his users about liberty and self-ownership, like a libertarian Oprah handing out book club picks instead of cars. Revenue crossed tens of millions of dollars. The FBI didn't have a task force for this. Nobody did. Bitcoin wallets didn't come with subpoenas attached. For nearly 2 years, Ross Ulbricht ran the most successful drug operation in American history, from public Wi-Fi, one browser tab away from a Starbucks barista who had no idea she was serving the era's most wanted man his oat milk latte. But freedom, it turns out, needs enforcement, and Ross didn't call the police. When a former employee threatened to expose users, Dread Pirate Roberts solicited a hit, then another, then several more. 6 murder-for-hire plots in total, paid for in Bitcoin, none of them actually carried out, mostly because the hitmen were undercover agents or con artists, or in one memorable case, both. Nobody died, that matters, but the intent was real, typed out in chat logs that read like a business memo with a body count. Meanwhile, the empire's foundation had a crack in it from the very beginning. Back in 2011, before Dread Pirate Roberts existed, a Bitcoin forum user named Altoid posted asking for programming help and listed a personal Gmail address. That Gmail address belonged to Ross Ulbricht. The FBI didn't need a supercomputer. They needed a search bar. Investigators traced servers, tracked wallets, and built a case slowly, the old-fashioned way, while Ross grew increasingly convinced Tor made him untouchable. He was wrong. On October 1st, 2013, in the science fiction section of a public library in San Francisco, Ross Ulbricht logged into Silk Road's admin panel. FBI agents staged a lover's quarrel beside him as a distraction, snatched his open laptop mid-session before he could hit the encryption key, and arrested the internet's most wanted Kingpin, surrounded by paperbacks about dystopian futures he apparently hadn't read closely enough. The trial in 2015 was quick and unkind. Prosecutors painted Ross as a calculating drug lord. His lawyers argued naive idealist, framed by a system that never anticipated code as a weapon. The jury didn't need long, guilty on all 7 counts. And then came sentencing, the part where the story stops being about drugs and starts being about math. Judge Catherine Forrest handed down 2 life sentences, plus 40 years, without the possibility of parole. Not for violence, not for a body count, for running a website. It was, at the time, one of the harshest sentences in American history for nonviolent crime. Harsher, statistically, than the average sentence for actual murder. Ross went to prison at 29. He would leave, if the sentence held, never. For over a decade, Silk Road became internet folklore, the case libertarians cited, the case tech bros whispered about, the cautionary tale prosecutors used to scare the next generation of would-be dark web moguls straight. Ross Ulbricht became a martyr to some, a monster to others, and a Wikipedia page to almost everyone else. Then, in January 2025, on his first day back in office, President Donald Trump granted Ross Ulbricht a full and unconditional pardon. 11 years, 4 months, and several thousand internet arguments after his arrest, Ross Ulbricht walked out of federal custody a free man. Not through appeal, not through time served, but through a single signature. Here's the part that should actually keep you up at night. Not that Silk Road existed, that it could only have existed once. In 2011, Bitcoin was an inside joke with $11 of value and no chain analysis firms watching it move. Tor had a few 100,000 users, mostly researchers, mostly ignored. Law enforcement didn't have a dark web division. They'd confused detectives Googling, "What is Tor?" Every one of those conditions is gone now. Blockchain forensics can trace a Bitcoin transaction like a bloodhound with a subpoena. Every exchange demands your ID. Every darknet market since has folded faster because the FBI finally read the manual. Ross Ulbricht wasn't just a criminal. He was a brief accident of timing, a smart man who arrived exactly once, at the only moment history would allow it. The window he slipped through has been welded shut, permanently, on purpose, and nobody's ever slipping through it again.